everyone. I hope I'm not that boring for this one. I'm Vangelis Stykas. I used to live in Glasgow for a couple of years. Then I moved back to Greece, and when I moved back to Greece, I decided that I wanted to talk in Edinburgh, because that's me. I don't know. My talk is how I IDOR myself in. This is going to be a talk about APIs and how attackers. I was told not to use the word hacker, so attackers kind of look and attack APIs. The first slide is who am I? As I said, I'm Vangelis Stykas. I'm the CTO of Tremau. This is a governance slash finance tech startup from France. I'm an independent security researcher. My research interests are mainly API on IoT and web application security. You can find me on Twitter and on Mastodon on those handles, Stykas, and I'm also a PhD candidate for API security. What is an API? I really like MuleSoft's definition of API. I'm going to read it. It's the acronym for Application Programming Interface, which is a software intermediate that allows two applications to talk to each other. And that's about it. I'm not going to continue reading it. I'm going to explain what an API is. It's an easy way to interact with a DB layer. It comes with Disco and Stranger Things from the late 80s. As developers are quite lazy, they try, I'm no longer a developer, to write once and use it everywhere, which means that when you introduce a bug to an API, you can exploit it from a mobile, from a web, from wherever you want. It was meant to be seen only by machines, so it's a machine-to-machine protocol, but we ended up reading a lot of it. I'm gonna steal a really known guitar quote that says, it's easy to play guitar, it's really difficult to play good guitar. And I'm gonna say that it is easy to build an API, but it is really difficult to build a secure API. First thing is, what are the types of APIs? I'm going to split them into 4 groups. It's REST, GraphQL, SOAP, and non-standard APIs. The first and, well, the de facto standard from the industry is REST APIs. It's easy to identify, you can see it, it uses entities, so it's pretty predictable on how you interact with it. Usually it's CRUD, create, read, update, and delete, and has its corresponding HTTP verb. It's the most common, as I said, it's 56% of the current APIs use REST. The second is GraphQL. It's Facebook's child. It's also easy to identify. It's super easy to enumerate once you know the ropes, once you know how to interact with it, how to use its query language, its proprietary query language. It also returns JSON, but not the nice JSON. It returns some kind of a monster that they also call JSON. And if they have introspection, it's pretty much a game over. SOAP. I don't know if anyone uses SOAP. Microsoft created it. It used to be a big fan. Then it tried to kill it. It failed miserably. It tried to re-kill it. It failed miserably again because, I don't know, it's a soap opera. It's SOAP API. It's really old school. It returns XML. It has an envelope format. I hate it. You hate it. Everyone hates it. I don't know why they continue using it, but it's Microsoft, so I cannot really say anything. And the last one is custom APIs, which means whatever you feel like. It can be over WebSockets, it can return HTML, it can return JSON in XML in JSON. It can return whatever you feel like. It's usually used by proprietary devices or from developers that don't really understand APIs or they want to re-implement whatever they feel like. So that's one of the low-hanging fruits when you see it. Where APIs are used. They're used in IoT devices, they're used in web applications. Whenever you see an application taking more than 5 seconds to load, it means that it's calling 1 or 2 APIs to do something else. It's used on mobile application, on industrial IoT, on vehicles, on chargers, everywhere. you are going to see that everything IoT has an API behind it. I hear that it's just APIs. You cannot really do a lot of things. Well, you can gain full functionality of IoT devices. You can control them, make them do things that you wouldn't want to or you don't think that they want to. You can make IoT devices blow up, which is really funny. If you don't know them, but you should own them because otherwise you're breaking the law. You can punch through firewalls, you can pivot into internal networks. We have seen multiple times IoT devices from APIs being used as the initial vector to get access to internal networks. You can reflash and potentially break them. Again, you should own the device. What else we can do? SMS attacks, that's a really nice vector. So some IoT devices have SMS cards. You could send SMS, which means you can use Eurovision, you can win Eurovision, you can bomb a lot of SMS bomb a lot of telephone companies. You can use it as a botnet to do DDoS attacks. You can do ransomware attacks as the initial vector, and you don't need Shodan as you just use the API to interact with the devices that are already connected to that API. A special place in my heart is for the devices that share APIs. So more than once, I was looking at a certain IoT device, and when I started interacting with the API, I saw that that API was also used by other things. So we have ended up from a bathtub into a medical IoT device just from the API because they were sharing the APIs. And another special category is the industrial IoT, which is historically isolated, and now they want to do it smart, which means they're just adding something that is IP to whatever. So you end up with monsters like IP to RS-232 on the internet. So you have RS-32 from the internet. They have a long lifespan. I have seen devices that are older than me, and now I'm old, so I'm 40, and I have seen devices that are using APIs that are 45 years old. They're rarely updated, and they're safety critical. So if you own an IIoT, you can do a major damage. I'm gonna quote Mikko Hyponen: if it's smart, it's probably vulnerable, or it was vulnerable at some point in its life. What's this talk about? What we're going to do? What's the plan? We're going to see some of the OWASP API top 10 and how it was exploited at some point in my research. How easy it was to be exploited. I'm gonna be blunt. Everything in here is really simple. I'm a simpleton. I don't like crazy, difficult exploits. I just want to change a number and own a lot of things. And what's the severity of it? Most of them are really bad. There are some that are not that bad. What are the vulnerabilities of the APIs? The number one on OWASP is IDOR, also known as BOLA, which is Insecure Direct Object Reference. Number three is information disclosure, which discloses a lot of info. Authorization issue, as we're going to see, we're going to jump around some devices. Injection, which is typical SQL injection, don't go around doing it. And business logic flows. So let's be real, let's be pragmatic. If you don't know what CMA is, don't do anything that's in this talk. CMA stands for Computer Misuse Act, is an act that is from the 90s in the UK. API research is really tricky. You can end up doing crime just by changing a number. If you mistakenly access or interact with a device you don't own, you have to notify the vendor immediately. If you take platform admin, you are breaking the CMA. On the following slides, whatever is with red means that the CMA was broken, means that it was a crime for the UK. The first type of attack is classic IDOR, Insecure Direct Object Reference. It's the easiest of all. Whenever you see a number, you just change the number. If you get the response, you are accessing something that you shouldn't. It's typical symptom of missing authorization. You have to understand that it's a different thing, authorization and authentication. GUID is not a solution. It means that it's a little bit more difficult to find the device, but once you know the GUID, if authorization is not there, you still have IDOR, and it could lead into a lot of things, into breaking the full, leaking the full dataset, or even interacting with a lot of devices. The first IDOR example is Viper. It's a really well-known and used in the UK car alarm. As you can see in here, you could update the user just by the ID. That ID is an incremental number, so you could just change that 861 to whatever you want, change the password, and you had access to the device. So it means you can remote control of the vehicle alarm function. You can unlock the device, the vehicle, identify the vehicle, geolocate it, see if it is, I don't know, a nice Ferrari, whatever you want. Here in Edinburgh, go there, change the password, unlock it, drive away. All of them should be in red. Don't do it if you don't know the Ferrari. Second is the Project TV. That's a really nice Chinese charger. Can you see that they're missing pretty much everything in here? So that's the mobile application. You were supposed to log in, and afterwards there was no authorization at all. So the actual login was just so that it showed that it had the password, and that's about it. Then you could, even without it, you could just go here, do the charge ID with the TTD 0 whatever, and start doing. You could fully unlock the device, you could remote firmware update because obviously the firmware didn't have any checksum or whatever. You can backdoor it and pivot into an internal network, and you could get platform admin and get all the 40,000 chargers that were around in the UK. And you didn't even have to log in. So learn that authentication is not equal to authorization, or someone will come after you at some point in your life. And that point would be really quick with now and all the scanners. The second attack is the obvious, and I think all the devs in here know it. It's a SQL injection or XSS injection or RCE. If you don't know what it is, please read what an SQL injection is. There's a lot of automated ways to find it. They're really rare nowadays, but if you find them, usually they also go into remote command execution. The first injection is the Truth Spy. It's a really bad stalkerware that we are going after for the past year. We're trying to bring them down. They're actively exploiting vulnerable people and listening on them. I'm not going to give you a 0 day because EFF told me that I shouldn't give 0 days at all. So yeah, they have an SQL injection. If you feel like it, go try to find it. And if you find it, you're going to get remote control on all monitor devices, leaking full dataset and data from everywhere, RC on all their servers, and there are a lot of servers, and possible to identify a crime syndicate. That's on you. I didn't do any of those. Those are all in red. They're breaking the law. How you're going to avoid the injections. Use a modern framework. Always sanitize your inputs. Keep the principle of least privilege. Try to be as benign as possible. Don't share database. Don't share credentials. Try to be as sanitized as possible on all your inputs. Lazy REST implementation. That's one of my really beloved ones. It means that when you are using a framework, it usually automatically creates your extra functions that you usually don't use. So when you are getting a user, it also creates the update the user and delete the user. If you don't remove that from your code, someone else will try to exploit it. So you need to check response and request to find them. There are typical symptoms of using an ORM lazily, and it could lead into platform admin or interacting with things that you shouldn't. First, really happy example is EVBox. It's one of the really good chargers that I have looked at. They had pretty much all and everything correct. They did everything nice, except that. So when you are patching a user, it also was accepting roles. The roles usually was user. So I changed the user and said user one, because that's me. I wanted to have the role of user one. The API was nice enough to tell me, well, I don't know what user one means. You meant user, you meant admin, you meant account owner, or tenant admin. So I'm like, I'm an admin and probably tenant admin, because that also seems really, really nice role to have. What could I do? Total compromise of everything, and I mean everything. I was an admin of the tenant, which means I could remove all admins, I could do whatever I want. PII leakage, that's also in red. You shouldn't access other people PII. You could have all admin functionality, platform admin, server admin. It also had the tenant a really useful thing that says run that code on the server, which is practical RC. What to do to avoid this kind of problems? Check response and request. No? Yeah. Really nice child's watch. I don't know if anyone is tracking their kids. If they do, don't do that. But that's advice from a person that's not that good. TikTok track had that really nice thing. We did that research with Tony from Australia. So it had an open API, which was a really open API, because it says users filter family identifier equals with a number. So first of all, if you change that filter, if you change that identifier, you could access other families. But why don't remove the whole filter and get all the families in the world? So yeah, not a great thing. You could also interact with the device. This is the post API newest location, which means that you could position the child wherever you felt like. So you could literally steal the child, I don't know, abduct the child, and send locations somewhere else. So the parent would think that the children was there, the child was there. Well, it was not. Don't do that again. That's a crime. That's me scaring the living shit of children of Tony's, what's his name? I don't remember his name. In Australia, don't do that either. What was there? It was a total compromise of everything, PII leakage, all admin functionality, platform admin. This was not everything though. I didn't get remote command execution, so yeah, that's on it. You avoid using automatically generated code as a rule of thumb, or if you generate the code, know exactly what that code does. Whitelist only the properties that should be updated by the client, so I don't see a point having anyone update the roles unless they're an admin. The user should always have their own roles assigned by an admin and not update themselves. Explicitly define and enforce schemas for the input data payloads. That should also be testable from unit tests. User group juggling, that's one of my favorite. There are multiple potential ways of user group juggling. To explain, it's usually when you have a cloud, you create user groups, and then you assign users to those user groups. Usually, you also have access to certain groups. So if you could access other user groups and add admins in there, you're user group juggling. It could lead into platform admin, account takeover, and pretty much everything. Probably the biggest finding, the most severe finding that I ever found was on SONICWALL. You can see in here that I was also parsing the party group ID, which means I could add an admin on another group ID, which means that I could access routers, firewalls, VPNs, security reports, traffic analysis, VIP. I could literally interact, put an SSL certificate as an intermittent and have access into everything, anything that SONICWALL was selling as the software as a service. I had admin on all their SaaS, and it took them 14 or 15 days because they needed to back-check their fix, which means they were 15 days vulnerable after it was reported, which is a pretty bad response time. Second example is Mimosa. I don't know if anyone knows them. It's a military grade, that's what they say, and antenna provider. And as you can see in here, again, I was registering the user, and when I was registering the user, I just said, yeah, let's go with that user group ID because that's my user group ID. I always wanted to be on a user ID which is named root and has all the access in the world on all the user group IDs, because why the hell not, right? And what you could do, all user, PII leak, RC on all the devices, access to all internal networks, full organization access, and I don't know, a lot of bad things. Never be lazy, always check for correct authorization, check that the user has access to that entity, and try to be as thorough as possible into anything that is accessing user access functions. Second level IDOR, that's another nice thing, which is there might be a check on your URL, but then it could have a second level IDOR that it doesn't have the check. So you could add a user on a group that you don't have access, and it says, no, you don't have access to that group. So say, I want that user ID to add it on a user group that I have access, which means I now can see the user and I can control the user. And by proxy, I can also control the groups that that user controls. So the fact that there is a check on the first level does not mean it's everywhere. You should check all the IDs, every combination of it, and it could also lead to account takeover. Wallbox, again, charger, not so good. Although they had the first IDOR, I have found, not we, 5 different occurrences of the same second level IDOR on 5 different days. So they didn't fix the underlying issue, they were just fixing them on a case-to-case scenario. You can see in here, access config, that's the user, and it says the chargers. So I obviously don't know charger number 1. The charger number 1 is, I don't know, the first charger that was ever, I think it's Wallbox. And the other 2 are chargers that I own. I could totally control all the chargers, lock and unlock any charger, and obviously PII leak. All the info has PII leak in there because you access other people's data. REST verb juggle, that's one of the really strange ones. So when you see something that is putting, you could also check the post and delete and vice versa, which means you could do things that it was automatically generated. The developer didn't know that existed or ignored it altogether, but you end up with a lot of functionality that isn't there. You try to guess what function would be implemented. It could also lead to platform admin. That's, I have given that talk now 5 times. Each time I say that I'm gonna drop that 0 day. This is 2.5 years of a company that has that vulnerability. They never fixed it, and I'm not going to drop a 0 day for you. It gives a lot of access to a company that should have fixed it, and it's in the UK. So I think that there's also an employee in here. I'm going to talk with him later. Never use the full controller URL mapping. Always check for authorization. That's every time I'm going to say, check for authorization. Don't just check for authentication. Hide the endpoints. That's also a really nice thing. So I have seen JavaScript function. I have read a lot of JavaScript code. I know that I don't like JavaScript, but as a pen tester, I had to read a lot of it. And I have found admin functions that were built in there and was not properly authorized, as always. You can also use automated tools to extract all endpoints and then check what it is there. Then, when you see, you try to check where corners were cut or what you could do to eventually get what you want. Pandora, a really nice car alarm that said it's unhackable. So you know that this is a red flag. If you read that something is unhackable, it grinds your gears. So I have to find out what's going on in there. So they had the Sputnik Workers ID, which means when they were onboarding a worker, they said to him, create the user, and then we are going to call that, make you a worker, and then assign you a new email, which was Pandora provided. Spoiler alert, it was not Pandora provided. So you could just go on any ID that's an incremental integer, change their email, because now they're a Pandora worker, and then use that email to password reset, get to the vehicle, geolocate it, unlock it, stop it, listen to someone from an internal microphone, because apparently that alarm also had an internal microphone for reasons I don't really understand, but it's really scary to hear someone from Greece while they are in their car in the UK. And profit, I don't think of a legal way that you can profit on that, but if you feel like profiting, yeah, cool. Those are also child lockers. It's really, really bad. A JavaScript file was named backup.js, and it was on a live server. So I just read it. I saw that it was tarring something on a public S3 bucket. So I got that zip file because it's public bucket. I want to see what it is. I ended up with all the source code, static keys, SSH passwords, database configs, database dumps, full RC on everything, and there had a lot of devices. When you log in as an admin and you see 50 million devices around the globe which are used to track kids, you are really, really scared. You could geolocate any device. You can use it to send SMS. So imagine if I send, I don't know, is the UK in Eurovision? If it's not, send 50 million SMSs for Greece to win Eurovision. So like, yeah, let's win Eurovision. Listen to someone from microphone and, I don't know, do a lot of scary stuff. The other one is ChargePoint. It's one of the biggest globally available chargers. They're public chargers. They had their introspection GraphQL available. You could just run the introspection and have everything in there. So stop a car charger, charge for free, PII, charge someone else, do whatever you feel like. Potentially also get credit card information, but I didn't go that way because, yeah, I don't want to go that way, never. When you're a developer, keep in mind that people will look, people will decompile your application, people will go after your application. You cannot say that, oh, I have statically compiled that SSA key in my iPhone application because it's an iPhone application. Who's going to look in the application? Everyone is going to look at your application. Test for broken workflows. You should incorporate automated testing that says, especially on user functions, but on all the flows to have someone join from second step or stop at the second step and see how your application will interact with that broken flow. Again, it is really, really critical. I cannot emphasize how critical it is to authorize all your requests. Check that the one who says that he has access there has access there. Authentication is nothing if you don't authorize it. It's usually nowadays, in the past 10 years, we do have authorization, but we need to be thorough, because even on one request, if one request is not authorized, you will end up with a really big time bomb in your hands, which can end up with an attacker getting platform admin on you. Consequences can be a complete compromise of all accounts, or even worse, I don't know, remote command execution, everything. Never, ever, ever trust user input. Any questions?
What's the difference between a REST and a RESTful? REST and RESTful, I'm kind of confused with the two differences.
What's the difference between REST?
REST and RESTful services?
They're the same thing.
Are they the same thing?
Yeah, I think so. At least in my point of view, REST and RESTful are interchangeable in my point of view.
Also, another thing is those JSON files you showed on the screen, is it possible that they can be encrypted, can't they?
Yeah, but you have to decrypt it on the client.
Yeah,
so it will add
you can provide a hash key, right? And they can an MD5.
Yes, but then you just add an extra step on the attacker to compute that hash, because it would have to be computed on the client. So the logic of the computation is on the client. It would have to be decompiled, and then it's an extra step that can be overtaken, though.
And it's also HTTP they use, that protocol. Why can't we use HTTPS?
Most of them are HTTPS.
Are they?
Yeah. But you just interact, you intervene with burp or whatever else proxy, you trust the SSL. Long story short, if something touches the client, you should consider it's compromised. Full stop.
There's also another thing about JavaScript. A lot of those APIs are JavaScript. You've got Node.js and some MVC JavaScript framework, and they talk to each other, and it's on the caching, so it's sessionless. So after the handshake is done, that's it. So the security was.
Usually they have a bearer token. So after the handshake, they always add a bearer token, which is either JWT or some other bearer token that has authentication or authorization, whatever your application logic is on the server.
Yeah, the thing is, like, I know Apache's got so many back-end stuff, right? But Nginx is actually a lot better. It's a lot more powerful. There are some encryption apps for Nginx.
There are a lot of HTTP servers. Each have its strong and weak points. I have seen Nginx being pwned. That's mostly a logic flow on the application. This has not a lot to do with the HTTP server. So I didn't provide any actual 0 days for HTTP servers, or do I have any 0 days for HTTP servers? Any other questions?
Sorry, can we use the microphone if that's okay? It's just a little recording. Thanks very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you for the talk, Vangelis. You have made the hair at the back of my neck stand up. Quite scary stuff. From the point of security testing, how do you rate the effectiveness of scanning tools to detect some of this stuff? And what's, from your perspective, the most effective way of security testing an API? Thank you.
Well, first of all, the automatic scanners are gonna get the injections, they're gonna get probably the latest scanners are also going to get that the hidden endpoints, but all the other things either want a proper automated tool that also has domain knowledge. So I have seen automated tests being written from IDOR and for actions that shouldn't be made, but these tests will need to be written by a QA engineer that has domain knowledge and can track it. I have also written and saw that at the academic level there are a couple of AI solutions that will detect IDOR and juggling, but this is in no way production level software right now. This is still an academic software. Anyone else?
So manual testing would be the best thing you can do?
I'm gonna say that if manual testing is properly done, yeah, that's the proper thing to do. But as I have seen a lot of people do manual testing, but just by running automated tools, you would have to also take into consideration the company the person who's doing the manual testing and his experience on APIs. Thank you.